A 7 out of 10 on a game in a series that you're a fan of sounds like it's a pretty horrible game, but that's what I gave Echoes of Wisdom when I was asked it during a stream. And I'm a Zelda fan. A lot of the big outlets that, do reviews regularly on video games, they were giving it 9s out of 10s. So why, as a fan, was I not giving it a 10 out of 10? Why did I give it a 7 out of 10? Echoes of Wisdom is a game where we get to play as Princess Zelda for the first time in a mainline game. And it's really interesting because it takes the, you can kind of do whatever you want aspect of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but puts it in a 2.5D setting. And it also goes back to the more linear style of storytelling that, the Open Sky games lacked. So again, it's going back to, a formula that a lot of fans enjoyed, the sort of linear storytelling. And it also gave you kind of the freedom to do things the way you wanted to, like you could in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So why am I reviewing it so bad? Well, there are 4 main reasons. And let's start with the first one and the obvious one, my biases. So my earliest memory that I have about video games in general, as well as for the Legend of Zelda series, was begging my mom, my dad, my older cousins to play A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. That is the earliest memory I have, and I also know that, a part of that memory was, my dad was like, hey, I don't know what to do anymore, so I don't want to play this, because he got to a point where he just didn't know what to do anymore. So, as someone who acknowledges their own biases, because I have played just about every mainline Zelda game, there's literally one mainline game that I haven't played, and that was Triforce Heroes, because I don't really see a reason to get a second system. The Switch is the first time that I've gotten a second system, and even then, that was only because I talked to my husband that if Nintendo released a Zelda-themed Switch, we would get a second Switch. And to play Triforce Heroes, you needed to have other people with, I think it was either the 3DS or the DS gaming system and the game. And well, I didn't have other people that I knew that had the game and a 3DS. So there was no reason for me to play it. Also, I heard that the first person, the singular player mode, wasn't really great, so not really upset about that. And then in terms of spin-off games, the only ones I haven't played is the Philips CDI games, because, well, that system didn't do too good, and, it's really hard to find the system, let alone the games. And then the Link's crossbow training for the Wii, because I don't do shooters, and that's what that is that it's a shooter. If I'm playing a Zelda game and I have arrows in it, and I have to aim, I'm using the Z targeting feature. I am not actually aiming the arrows. So, my own biases, I have played just about every Zelda game, so I know, kind of what my expectations are. So knowing that, my own biases are going to have me review a game higher in the Zelda series than, probably someone who's neutral about the Zelda series, I'm going to knock a few points off. So the second reason why I gave it a 7 out of 10 is it's a fairly short game. I understand it's, a top-down kind of 2D Zelda game, and it's not made directly by Nintendo, so it was probably going to be short anyways. But, considering you come off of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdoms, onto this, and it feels like they could have done more with it. It feels like there could have been so much more that they could have done with it, because you had your first temple, which is your tutorial, 2 other temples after that, and then the castle and the 3 other main temples where you release the goddesses from. That's 7 if you count the final lair, 8 temples, which is respectable. But again, it feels like they could have done more with them because even the temples seemed kind of short. Now, don't get me wrong, I probably spent like 30 minutes to 45 minutes on a temple just because I'm someone who likes to run around and explore. But still, it felt like a short game, and it feels like they could have done more with it. And I wanted to play more. That's the whole reason, is that I wanted to play more, but I had pretty much done everything. So what are you gonna do? Third reason why I had a problem with, the game was the echoes and the automatons. There was a wide selection of echoes, which was good, and because it, basically meant that, you could do things the way you wanted to do them. Yeah, sure, everyone ended up having, favorite echoes, or, echoes that were just so useful, like there was no reason not to use them all the time. Like the beds. Everyone's used the beds, and they're super handy. Like whenever something's super handy, you just use it. And then in terms of that, like my biggest complaint was more the automatons, because it felt like those came in pretty late in the game, and like there wasn't, once you've had like so many echoes, there wasn't really a reason to use them. Like, sure, they had little features and things like that that were kind of cool and neat if you, spun them up and used them. But, like, you could at the exact same time just summon an echo. It's way quicker, and, like, you had them from go. So, it just felt like the automatons weren't very well implemented. Like, I don't know if there's a way to get to them earlier than I did, because I think I got to them after Hyrule Castle. But it felt like you should have been able to get them sooner, so then you would actually be encouraged to use them. So I think that was just, like, if they would have done something to where you didn't have to spin them up, or it didn't take as long to spin up, or like you activate, like I've never really, again, they came late in the game for me, so I didn't really play with them. So I don't know if, once you spin them up, they'll just follow you around everywhere, or if you like change areas, they stop. Again, they were just so late in the game for me that there wasn't really any reason to use them. And then the final reason is Null, the final boss, the big bad guy. I don't know how I feel about him. Let me explain why. I've played a lot of White Wolf tabletop games, and my particular favorite one is Werewolf the Apocalypse. Now, if you don't know what that is, let me, give you a little bit of background about the story for that game. The idea of that story is that you are playing a werewolf that is in charge of, protecting the earth. And the main thing that you're protecting the earth from is something called the worm. Now, the history of the worm is that the worm is a part of a trio, the trio of creation. You have the wild, which, makes things, finds things, is just creation. Then you have the weaver. It looks at the things that the wild makes and is like, okay, this is going to do this is going to do that. Like, the weaver dictates what something does and what its purpose in life is. And then you have the worm. The worm is the destroyer. Once something has fulfilled its purpose, it breaks that down, so then that way the wild can use the base components to once again make more stuff. So at some point, whether you are someone who believes that the weaver went crazy or the worm went crazy, something happened where both kind of sort of went crazy, and the worm went out of control with breaking stuff down, and the weaver trapped it to keep it from breaking everything all the time. So Null, in my mind, when I heard like what he did, like when the goddesses explained what Null was, I was like, that sounds like the worm. Something is created and pops up in the void. Null eats it. Now, sure, it's not the same thing because Null just immediately ate it because it was there. But it was still one of those things where it's like, Null is someone that breaks stuff down. So then it can be, create more stuff later. So the idea that at the end of the game, they basically wished Null out of existence makes me slightly concerned of what potentially could take his place. And would that thing be better or worse than Null? Because if things aren't breaking down when they're no longer useful or they're already decaying, then what ends up happening with that stuff? Also, there was the whole aspect that, like, he was eating things that popped up. So where were the goddesses when, like, around Null? Like, was Null just in a completely different area? And the goddesses, whenever they came into existence, were so far away from Null that they literally, like, he didn't have the ability to eat them because they were just so far outside of his reach. So they eventually grew and gained power. And whenever they finally, saw Null and realized what Null was, that's whenever, they implemented their plan to trap him. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about him and the way that he was dealt with, because again, he felt like he was something on par with the goddesses, and it was only because they outnumbered him that they were able to actually trap him. I don't know if a goddess on her own would have been able to handle him. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about Null as a bad guy, and I don't know if Nintendo's going to do anything in terms of, like, his replacement, something that, takes things and breaks them down once they've fulfilled their purpose. Because even in the game, it said, if someone or something gets trapped in the still world for long enough, it just disappears. It gets broken down and turned into something else at some point, because there's just all this material of creation floating around. It will eventually form into something. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about Null, and, like, don't get me wrong, I love the lore implications of him. I love the idea that Null, in an attempt to destroy the world that was imprisoning him, created Demise and sent him up through a fissure that it had created, so then that way it could go and wreck the world. Like, I love that idea. I really, really do. I don't remember who it was, but I loved the idea that someone brought up that in A Link Between Worlds, like, Lorule, when it lost their Triforce, like, Null started eating their world. Like, I love that idea. I love those concepts. They're great. But again, I don't know, with Null being what he was, how he ended, like, that just doesn't feel right to me for reasons. Because it seems like if you have a cycle of creation and destruction, if you get rid of one of those parts of the cycle, bad things are going to happen. And I don't think Nintendo's going to play around with that. I could be wrong, but I don't think Nintendo's going to play around with that. So, by no means, I do not think someone should not buy Echoes of Wisdom. It's lots of fun. If you want something that, you can knock out in, a few days if you play it constantly, like, I played it for, a few hours for, like, 3-4 days, and I knocked it out in, like, 8, I think. Like, it's a great game. I really do think you should buy it, and I have an affiliate link below if you want to, potentially pick it up for this Black Friday. Like, now would be a great time to pick it up if, you can find a deal or a special on it. So if I don't acknowledge my own biases, then I would have also given the game a 9 out of 10. Again, whole reason why it's not a 10 out of 10 is mostly because it was short and I wanted more. Now, that's the only reason why I would have given it a 9 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10 is because it was too short and I wanted more. Just wanted more. So I personally think it is a beautiful blend of, the open sky style that they did in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and going back to the more linear sort of traditional storytelling of the older games, because in my opinion, that was the biggest problem people had with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, is that it didn't have a linear plot line. Now, Tears of the Kingdom had more of a linear plot line, if you ask me, and if you want, you can watch my next video on, how I outline how Tears of the Kingdom has a linear plot line. But yeah, no, that's my thoughts, that's my opinions. Echoes of Wisdom got a 7 out of 10 because, you know, I acknowledge my biases. But me as a fan, not looking at my own biases, definitely a 9 out of 10. All right. I love you all. I hope you have a great day. Be safe and bye.